Well, welcome back. This is part 2 of a lesson called Logic Basics and Doubts About Morality. In part 1, we learned logic basics. In this video, we're going to discuss various kinds of doubts about morality, or something called moral skepticism. Moral skepticism just is an attitude of doubt about morality. And so the moral skeptic, there are some varieties of moral skepticism, but roughly the moral skeptic thinks that either there is no such thing as a true moral claim, or that moral knowledge is impossible, so that even if there were true moral claims, we couldn't know them. So some moral skeptics just think morality is merely a matter of opinion, that there aren't any objective moral claims. Other moral skeptics think that morality is not the kind of thing that we can know. That is, you can't prove moral claims. So that's moral skepticism, and that's the topic of this video. And what I really want to do in this video is analyze a couple of the most common arguments for moral skepticism. And so we're going to analyze the logic of moral skepticism. If you're uncomfortable with logical analysis, I really encourage you to go back and watch the previous video where I explained things like logical validity and logical soundness, because what I want to do today is talk about whether or not the arguments for moral skepticism are logically sound. So if you don't understand what that means, go back and watch the first video. Okay, so moral skepticism is an attitude of doubt about morality, or the claim that moral knowledge is impossible, or the claim that there are no true moral claims. I'm going to, in order to be precise and consistent, use this term moral skepticism the same way our textbook author Russ Shafer Landau does. And so what Russ Shafer Landau says is that moral skepticism is not just an attitude of doubt about morality, but it's a denial of objective moral standards. And objective moral standards are just true moral claims. That is, they're moral claims that are true whether you believe them or not. And so an objective moral standard would be a moral principle or a moral rule that is true for all people regardless of whether or not they believe it. And that's really just what objectivity is. It's saying that the truth of an objective claim does not depend on your subjective opinion. So for example, it's objectively true that the earth is round. It's round whether you believe it or not. If you don't know this, there are people who don't believe that the earth is round. They call themselves flat earthers. I think they believe the earth is like a pancake. You can watch some of their videos on the internet, although I would not recommend it. They had a convention in Raleigh a few years ago, but the point here is that the flat earth convention in Raleigh actually took place on a round earth. All those flat earthers, they live on a round earth. Their opinions don't affect the shape of the earth, because the shape of the earth is, objectively speaking, round. It's round whether they believe it or not. Objectivity in ethics would be the idea that there are moral claims that are true regardless of whether or not people believe them. That is, that you can actually say things that are true or false about morality, irrespective of people's opinions. That morality is not just a matter of opinion. And the moral skeptic doubts objectivity. They doubt that there can be objective moral claims, or that we can know them. So, we're going to analyze moral skepticism, or put a different way, we're going to ask whether or not objectivity in ethics is possible. Now, in my experience, many, if not most, intro to ethics students will endorse some variety of moral skepticism. They will doubt that objectivity in ethics is possible, and usually they'll say something like this. It's like, Mr. G, there aren't any moral facts. Morality is a matter of opinions. And if I press them why they doubt that there can be objective moral claims, usually I'll get an argument that goes something like this. Mr. G, it's a matter of opinion. People's opinions about morality differ all the time. For example, some people think that abortion is murder because it involves the intentional killing of the innocent. Other people think that abortion is health care. It's a private matter between a woman and her doctor. A woman has a right to bodily autonomy and to do what's best for her own health. And in some cases, the pregnancy is actually a life-threatening condition. And so, abortion's health care, for example. Or some people think that capital punishment is justice because it involves giving people who've committed heinous and depraved crimes what they deserve. That the punishment should fit the crime, and that's fair. Other people think that capital punishment is itself heinous and depraved, that capital punishment is cruel and unusual, and it should be abolished. So some people think the death penalty is wrong, and other people don't, and so that can't be an objective moral standard. It's just all that exists is opinion. You can multiply examples. Some cultures are polygamous. That is, they believe a man can have as many wives as they want. Other cultures are monogamous. They believe that a man can only have one wife at a time. And so people's opinions differ about monogamy and polygamy, about how many wives a man can have. And so there can't be an objective moral standard. It's just a matter of opinion. People's opinions differ on all kinds of topics. Homosexuality, gay marriage, immigration, the ethics of war and peace, animal rights, animal welfare. That is, moral discourse is nothing but arguments about different moral opinions, and there really aren't any objective moral facts that could settle any of those arguments. I can't think of any other single line of argument that has persuaded more people to be more skeptical about the possibility of moral knowledge or making progress in ethics than this one. So, let's analyze it. Let's call this the differences of opinion argument. And remember our steps for analyzing a philosophical argument that we covered in the previous video. The first question you have to ask yourself is, what is this argument meant to prove? And that'll be the conclusion of the argument. And this argument is meant to prove that there are no objective moral standards. That is, that moral skepticism is true. And what reasons are being given? Well, the reasons that we're being given is that there are differences of opinion, that people's beliefs about morality contradict each other. And so, for example, some people believe abortion is wrong. And other people believe that abortion is not morally wrong. All right, so we've got our conclusion that there are no objective moral standards. We've got our reasons, which are our premises, that some people believe X is morally wrong and other people believe X is not morally wrong. And again, you can multiply, you can fill in the blank for X here. Some people believe abortion is morally wrong, other people don't. Some people believe capital punishment is morally wrong, other people don't. Some people believe that polygamy is morally wrong, other people don't. Some people believe that eating meat is morally wrong, other people don't. Some people believe war is morally wrong, other people don't. Some people believe homosexuality is morally wrong, other people don't. You can multiply examples, but you get the idea is that people have differences of opinion, there are cultural differences, and because of this failure to reach agreement about moral claims, morality must just be a matter of opinion. There aren't any objective moral claims that are true for everybody. That's the structure of the argument. Now remember, when we're assessing a philosophical argument, as I told you in the previous video, we have to ask two questions. One, are the premises true? And two, if the premises were true, would the conclusion follow from them necessarily? Well, so first of all, are our premises true? Is it true that people disagree about abortion, capital punishment, homosexuality, polygamy, immigration, gun control, etc., etc., etc.? Clearly that is true. There are indeed differences of opinion about moral claims. But now, is this argument logically valid? Is it logical? Does this conclusion 3 follow from those premises 1 or 2 logically? Does the fact of our different opinions prove that there isn't an objectively true answer? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. This will be easy. This is an invalid argument. The differences of opinion argument is invalid. This argument doesn't work. This kind of conclusion doesn't follow from these kinds of premises. This will be easier to see if you take less controversial cases or non-moral cases, just to think about the structure of the argument. I mean, because really what's happening in this argument is we're saying, look, some people believe X, and other people believe not X. And therefore, there is no objective truth about X. But for this to be a valid argument, all arguments of this form would work. That is, in every case where 1 was true and 2 was true, then 3 would have to be true. It would be impossible for premise 1 to be true, premise 2 to be true, and the conclusion 3 to be false. Assuming the truth of 1 and 2 would guarantee the truth of 3. That's what it means to say an argument is logically valid. But the truth of 1 and 2 don't guarantee the truth of 3. Let me give you some examples. Suppose I said something like this. Some people believe that the earth is round. That's true. Other people believe that the earth is not round. Also true. But does it follow from that that there's no objective truth in geography? No, that's false. There is an objective truth in geography, regardless of what people believe. I'll give you another example. Some people believe that millions of Jews were killed in the Holocaust. Other people do not believe that. There's a whole group of people, they call themselves Holocaust deniers. They deny that millions of Jews were killed in the Holocaust. So it's true that some people believe millions of Jews were killed during the Holocaust. It's also true that other people do not believe that. Does it follow from their disagreement that there are no objective truths about history? Clearly not. It's objectively true that the Holocaust happened, whether people believe it or not. I'll give you a third example. Some people believe that vaccines are safe and effective. Other people do not believe that vaccines are safe and effective. Those are both true claims, but does it follow from their disagreement that there are no objective facts about medicine? Clearly not. It's just that some people's opinions about medicine are better than others. Some people's opinions about medicine are true, and other people's opinions about medicine are false. You see, when people disagree, it doesn't mean that it's a mere matter of opinion. I mean, it could be a mere matter of opinion, or it could be that some people's beliefs are correct and other people's beliefs are incorrect. The fact that people disagree about history doesn't prove that there's no objective historical facts. The fact that people disagree about medicine doesn't prove that there are no objective medical facts. The fact that people disagree about geography doesn't prove that there are no objective geographical facts. So why then should the fact that people disagree about morality prove that there are no moral facts? Well, the point here is that it doesn't. That it's possible that we disagree about abortion and capital punishment and euthanasia and immigration and homosexuality and polygamy because morality is a mere matter of opinion. But it's also possible that some people's moral opinions are correct and other people's moral opinions are incorrect. The point here is that the differences of opinion argument is an invalid argument. This kind of conclusion doesn't follow from these kinds of premises. All right, so the differences of opinion argument is invalid. In fairness, I should say that if you want to be sophisticated about this, you could say the kind of thing that J.L. Mackie would say, or that J.L. Mackie does say, because in his essay on the subjectivity of values, which you can read, it's in our textbook, in the Ethical Life textbook, J.L. Mackie's on the subjectivity of values, he analyzes this kind of argument and concedes the point here that, technically speaking, our differences of opinion don't prove that morality is not objective. But what he says is that the differences of opinion aren't meant as proof that morality is not objective. They're meant as evidence that morality is not objective, and that this isn't meant to be a deductive argument where the conclusion follows from the premises necessarily. It's only meant to be an inductive argument where the conclusion follows from the premises probably. That is, probably we have these differences of opinion about morality because morality is not objective. Or what he says is it's something called an inference to the best explanation. That the best explanation of our disagreements about morality is that morality is not objective. Probably. That's J.L. Mackie's view. It's a little bit beyond the scope of what I want to accomplish today. But if you're really determined to defend moral skepticism, despite my analysis of this argument, I would take a look at the J.L. Mackie piece there. Okay, but anyway, okay, so difference of opinion argument is logically invalid. Now, at this point, if you're very clever, you've probably been following along and think something like, Mr. G's pulled a fast one on us here, you see, because in order to analyze this argument, he's moved outside of the realm of morality, which is a matter of opinion, and into the realm of geography and history and medicine, which are factual scientific disciplines. That is, there are medical facts, and there are geographical facts, and there are historical facts. That is, there are facts in the natural and social sciences, but there aren't moral facts. That is, morality and ethics is a different kind of a thing than history or geography or medicine. Okay. Well, what's the difference? Well, you might say, look, the difference is this. There are geographical facts, that is, I can prove to you that the Earth is round. And there are historical facts. I can prove to you that the Holocaust happened. And there are medical facts. I can prove to you that vaccines are safe and effective. But there are not moral facts. I can't prove to you whether or not abortion is wrong. I can't prove to you whether or not capital punishment is wrong. I can't prove to you whether or not homosexuality is wrong. I can't prove to you whether or not polygamy is wrong. I can't prove to you whether or not wars are morally justified. That is, the difference between the natural and social sciences, like history and medicine, and science like ethics, well, is that ethics isn't a science. You can't prove moral claims. You can't prove scientific claims. And so the reason we're forced to be skeptics about morality is not merely that we have differences of opinion, but more that you cannot prove moral claims. And so moral knowledge is impossible because moral claims can't be proven. this is a different argument. This is the second most common argument I see in favor of moral skepticism. We'll call this one the provability argument. And the provability argument seems to rest on this kind of conditional statement that if there were true moral claims or objectively true moral claims, then you could prove moral claims true or false. So if there were objective moral standards, then you could prove moral claims true or false. But, of course, you cannot prove moral claims. And therefore, there are no objective moral standards. And so we're forced to be moral skeptics because moral claims cannot be proven. Remember again what we learned in part 1, logic basics. First step of analyzing a philosophical argument. What is the argument meant to prove? Well, this argument is meant to prove that moral skepticism is true, that there are no objective moral standards. So that's our conclusion. Next step, what reasons are we being given as proof or evidence? Well, the reasons we're being given is that moral claims can't be proven, and that if moral claims can't be proven, then there aren't objective moral standards. So those are our premises. And then we have to ask ourselves, are the premises true, and is it logically valid? Does a conclusion follow from the premises? Let me start with the last point. Is this argument logically valid? Can we infer this conclusion 3 from these premises 1 and 2? And the answer to this is yes. This is a valid structure. Those of you who've had like a critical thinking class or logic class or any background in philosophy will recognize the form of this argument or the structure of this argument is called modus tollens, or denying the consequent. But if you haven't had any logic, you can see this for yourself. It's if P, then Q, not Q, and therefore not P. So, for example, oh, I'm sorry, I should not be using green ink with the green screen. Bear with me. So, like, for example, if my car runs out of fuel, then my car will stall. My car has not stalled, therefore my car has not run out of fuel. Or if it's snowing, then the temperature is below freezing. If the temperature is not below freezing, and therefore it's not snowing. That structure of argument is called modus tollens. It is a valid structure. If premise 1 is true, the conditional statement if P then Q, and premise 2 is true, not Q, then the conclusion 3, not P, must follow. So if P, there were no objective moral standards, then Q, you could prove moral claims. But not Q, you cannot prove moral claims, and therefore not P, there are no objective moral standards. That is a logically valid argument. If premise 1 is true and premise 2 is true, then the conclusion 3 must be true. But what I want to ask you today is, are premises 1 and 2 true? That is, granted that the provability argument is valid, is it sound? Well, let's think about it. The conditional statement, if there were objective moral standards and you could prove moral claims, I have my doubts about this one. That is, it seems to me that there can be things that are objectively true that you can't prove. So, for example, here's a statement. There are an even number of stars in the galaxy. That's either true or false. And in fact, there's a 50-50 chance that it's true, and a 50-50 chance that it's false. But I can't prove it one way or another. The mere fact that I can't prove to you that there are an even number of stars in the galaxy doesn't mean that the claim's false or true, or worse, that there isn't that the claim is neither true nor false, right? That is, the mere fact of our inability to prove something doesn't actually tell us whether or not it's objectively true. So I have my doubts about the first premise. However, I'm willing to grant the first premise for the sake of argument, because for my purposes today, I'm really interested in thinking about whether or not this second premise is true. Is it true that you cannot prove moral claims? I suppose it depends what you mean by proof. You see, I think there's an ambiguity in the term proof here. I suppose we'd have to agree that you can't prove moral claims the same way you would prove historical claims, the same way you would prove medical claims, the same way you would prove geographic claims, the same way you would prove claims in the natural sciences. That is, I don't think the scientific method is going to help us prove moral claims. That is, there's nothing I'm going to be able to see in my laboratory. There's no observation I can make under the microscope or through the telescope that is going to tell me whether or not capital punishment is morally justified. There's no science experiment that I can do that will tell me when and if wars are morally justified. No amount of historical documentation is going to prove to me whether or not animals have rights. And so I suppose we have to admit that moral claims aren't proven the same way that scientific claims are proven. But how big a problem is that? Why should we expect morality and ethics to use the same methods as science and history? It's a different kind of a discipline with different kinds of a methods. I mean, you don't go to a geometry class and look for microscopes because you don't use microscopes in geometry, right? So why are you looking for telescopes in ethics class? We don't use telescopes in ethics class. It's a different kind of a discipline with different kinds of methods. I'll give you a different way of putting this. I mean, think what it would take to falsify that second premise. You'd have to give an example of a case where you would accept proof of a moral claim. Well, would you accept proof of a moral claim? The philosopher James Rachels, in analyzing this exact argument, I should say in fairness, I've borrowed a lot of this lesson from James Rachels, who does a great job with this. He gives this example. Suppose you had a teacher who was giving an unfair test, or his assessments were unfair, and you went to the dean to complain, and the dean asked if you could prove that the teacher is unfair. Could you prove it? How would you prove it? Well, you might say something like this. Well, look, I mean, everybody in the class failed the last test. Most of us didn't even have time to complete half of it. And furthermore, I've done all the reading. And I've watched all the videos. And I've attended all the lectures. Here are my notes. Here's all the material that the instructor emphasized as important. And here's the test. And look how little the material on the test corresponds to the material that the instructor emphasized as important. I suppose you bring the instructor in and ask him, like, why isn't the test based on the material that we covered in class? Why didn't anybody have time to complete the test? And as he kind of fumbles through his answers, it becomes pretty clear to everybody there that the instructor is kind of incompetent. I mean, wouldn't that prove that the test was unfair, that the teacher was unfair? I mean, what more in the way of proof could the dean ask for? Well, so you proved the test is unfair. Did you prove a moral claim? I mean, I guess it depends what you mean by proof. I mean, what you did was you gave evidence that the teacher had violated a standard of fairness in testing that everybody in the academy had agreed to. Well, does that count as proving a moral claim or not? Because I want to suggest to you that is exactly the kind of thing that we do in ethics. We reason about our first principles. We try to come up with some rules or principles that we can agree to, and then we reason from those. That's how we do ethics. I don't know if you would call that proving a moral claim or not, but let me give you another example. Same kind of thing. How did the American abolitionists prove that slavery was unfair, or unjust, or morally wrong? How did the civil rights leaders prove that segregation was morally wrong? Well, didn't they argue that America had violated its own first principles? That we had these founding documents that said that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And didn't the abolitionists say, well, like, am I not a man and a brother? Read your founding documents. You said all men are created equal. I am a man. Do you not understand the meaning of your own language? You said all men have a God-given right to freedom, and yet you keep men in chains. Like, what kind of a hypocrite are you? And isn't that what Lincoln said? That our nation was conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. And isn't that what Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream was? That this nation would finally live out the true meaning of its creed, that all men are created equal. You see, the civil rights leaders argued that America had violated its own rules. They pointed out America's hypocrisy. The abolitionists argued that America had violated its own rules. They pointed out America's hypocrisy. How our practice contradicted our principles. And isn't that the same thing that you would do when you prove the test is unfair? That the teacher had violated a standard that the institution had agreed to. Now, I don't know if you want to call that proving moral claims or not, but that is the kind of thing we do in ethics. So, can you prove moral claims? I guess it depends on what you mean by proof. But if you would accept the kind of proofs that the civil rights leaders gave, that the abolitionists gave, that the students who had an unfair teacher gave, then you'd have to say that the second premise is false, that you can't prove moral claims. And if you say that the second premise is false, that you can't prove moral claims, well then the provability argument, although valid, is unsound. And I have one more thing to say about this. Because I imagine some of you are still saying, well, look, Mr. G, what you're talking about, that's not proof. What you're talking about is people arguing about their differences of opinion, and you can call it reasoning together about their differences of opinion, but it's still people are arguing about opinions that they cannot prove. In the end, science and history deal with facts, and morality deals with opinions. And I think probably part of the reason for these kinds doubts about morality that a lot of my students have is exactly this, is they think, well, there are two kinds of claims. There are facts and there are opinions. And the earth is round is a fact, and abortion is wrong is an opinion. Millions of Jews were killed in the Holocaust as a fact, and gay marriage is wrong is an opinion. And we were all taught at a very young age the difference between facts and opinions, right? And what's a fact? Well, a fact's true for everybody. It's objective. Like the earth is round is a fact. It's objective. It's round whether you believe it or not. And opinions are true for some people and not others. They're subjective. Like chocolate is the best flavor of ice cream is an opinion. It's true for me, might not be true for you. Maybe you prefer strawberry or vanilla or something. And the idea is that the moral claims are more like the latter kind of claim about the flavor of ice cream, and less like the former kind of claim about the shape of the earth. And so, but let's think about this. So let's go through a series of propositions here. So, okay. The earth is round, that's a fact. Chocolate is the best flavor of ice cream, that's an opinion. Canada is north of Texas, that's a fact. The Blues Brothers is the best movie ever made. That's an opinion. Millions of Jews were killed during the Holocaust. That's a fact. George Washington was the first president of the United States. That's a fact. Hip-hop was better in the 90s. That's an opinion. Manning's is the best restaurant in Johnston County. That's an opinion. Vaccines are safe and effective. That's a fact. But what about a claim like this? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. And that when a government becomes destructive of those ends, it is the right of the people to abolish it and institute new governments. Is that a fact or an opinion? Or how about this one? Boiling babies for your own amusement is morally wrong. So if I were to take a screaming baby and hold him by the ankles and slowly submerge him in a vat of bubbling, boiling grease, so he screams in agony, and I laughed hysterically, that would be wrong. So boiling babies for your own amusement is wrong. Is that a fact or an opinion? And it's like, well, it's not a fact. Like, the earth is round is a fact. So it must be an opinion, I guess. But do you really want to say that? I mean, do we really want to say that boiling babies is wrong is the same kind of a claim as chocolate is the best flavor of ice cream? Like, you prefer vanilla, I prefer chocolate, you prefer that we not boil babies for our own amusement, I prefer that we do. Is that really what we're going to say about human rights? It's a matter of taste. You believe in human rights? I don't. Potato, patata. Your opinion is no better than mine. Just a matter of taste. Is that what you want to say? I would hope not. I mean, if you do want to say that, it's going to be very difficult for us to make any progress in ethics, I'll concede. But hopefully most of you will think, well, no, I mean, it does seem true that boiling babies is wrong, and it does seem true that people have rights, and I don't know how you would prove it, but it doesn't seem right to say it's a matter of opinion the same way your taste in music or food is. What I want to suggest to you is maybe moral claims aren't really facts in the sense that, like, claims about science and history are facts, but they're not merely opinions in the way that our taste in food and music is an opinion. Maybe they're like a third kind of a thing. Call them rules or principles. And we can reason about what the rules and principles are, and we can reason about the implications of those rules and principles. Possibly. Something to think about. Hopefully, if you do kind of had doubts about morality, this lesson, if it hasn't made you renounce your moral skepticism, has at least maybe made you skeptical about your moral skepticism. Love to talk to you about it in the discussion board. So I'm going to sign off. We can talk about it there. Thank you very much.